Hello all, my name is Tyler,
And I'm John.
and together we are DeLong Rigging Solutions, or DRS for short.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit now about how to deal with an a line set that's out of weight. There are various reasons that a line set could be out of weight. I'm going to pick a real common one. Would be that we're hanging a piece of scenery that's laid on the floor and been assembled, but it hangs from cables. So you have to lift it up some to where the cables take weight, and then gradually take the weight of the whole piece to where you'll be balanced. In that case, you're going to have to run it for a certain distance to take the slack out of those cables and start taking weight. So in that kind of circumstance, we either knew or we've estimated the weight of the piece of scenery. We've had our weight loader add that amount of weight to the arbor, and now we need to slip it out to where the cables start to take tension and we can get the scenery piece flown off the floor so that it's balanced, that we can check and make sure that it's balanced. In this case, we've had the line secured while they were loading the weight and building the scenery, and now we're done loading the weight, we're done building the scenery, we're ready to float the piece. In this case, I've got the line set secured with a rope binder. I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to take the rope binder off and keep my hands squeezed on the operating line and hold the wrap in it with my hands. I'm going to open the lock slowly to make sure that I'm in fact in control of it with the wraps. And then I'm going to take the line here and I'm going to let it try to slide. Now it's not out of balance too much that I can barely make it run right now. So I'm going to grab it here below that first wrap and I'm going to take that wrap off. I'm going to lean back into it and I'm going to see if it'll run now. And now it'll run a little bit. So with that wrap on there, I can just keep feeding it, and anytime if I need to slow down or stop, or they're getting the scenery straightened out to stand the rest of the way up, all I got to do is lean back into it and keep that wrap tight. And I can keep letting it slide until the piece of scenery is floating, and at the point when this piece of scenery is floating, then I could let the wraps off the rest of the way and gradually, slowly let that transfer to both lines and check the weight to make sure it's balanced. All right, so another method of handling an out of weight load would be with an axe handle. Or a similar stick, but an axe handle is a pretty handy piece of hardware to be able to acquire easily. In this case, the the line set has been secured with an axe handle. The weight loader has added the appropriate amount of weight for the piece of scenery we're getting ready to fly, and the piece of scenery is assembled. So now we're ready to let the pipe slip it out until it takes the weight of the piece of scenery, and we can float the scenery and see whether we're balanced. I'm going to pull the axe handle out, and I'm going to feel here that it's still tight enough. I got enough wraps on it. It won't move anywhere. So I'm going to tilt my axe handle and take a wrap off and pull it down into the wrap. Make sure the wrap's tight. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to raise the axe handle up, and it's still got enough friction that it won't run by itself. So I'm going to take another wrap off. And this process is easier or more difficult depending on how much out of weight you are. The farther out of weight you are, the more sensitive it will be, and the more obvious it will be whether you can or can't take more wraps off. So now I'm down to just 2 wraps. I'm only about 80 pounds out of balance right now, so it's really doesn't take a lot of friction to hold 80 pounds. But we're going to raise it up here, and it still doesn't want to run. So I'm going to take another wrap off. And now when I slip, now it'll start to run. Okay? And if we were farther out of balance, then it would probably have done that with one additional wrap than what we have right now. But right now we're just down to about 1.5 wraps on it. But you see that as I raise it, that allows the wrap to come loose and it'll move. When I pull the axe handle down against the wrap, that tightens the wrap back up and stops the load from moving. And so at this point, we would slip it out and watching our load start to float. And once the load was completely floated, then we would grab our wraps and get the axe handle out of the way. Grab it down here right at the bottom of the wraps so that you've still got a hold of both lines. And at this point, check and see how it feels, whether it's balanced or not balanced with a piece of scenery on it. So that if you're not balanced, you can talk to your weight loader. If you have a mid-level loading bridge, you may need to go down and adjust it at the mid-level loading bridge, or you may need to let the arbor down to where you could adjust weight down here. All right, another circumstance which can happen sometimes is that you could end up running the load out of balance just with a rope binder. I wouldn't recommend this as a conscious choice, but if a circumstance comes up where it's the best choice given the options, it can be done. The problem with running with the binder is that it's more difficult to control and you really don't have any redundancy. If you lose control or something doesn't go quite right, the binder is more easy to lose control of. But if you're running it with a binder, what happens is you're going to take it loose, and as you let it off, it's going to start to run. As the ropes become closer to parallel, it'll start to run. But you have to hold it. It wants to travel, so you have to hold it in position. Sometimes it'll want to run up, sometimes it'll want to run down, depending on whether it's pipe heavy or arbor heavy. But depending on the amount of weight out of balance, this is very feasible. With a heavier load than this, becomes a little dicier. But for a medium amount of out of balance load, not terribly unreasonable. A binder such as this one, or this particular one, will hold about 600 pounds before it starts to slip. But that's with it locked full up. If you put more than 600 pounds on the arbor, it'll run with the binder on it. Just to give you some kind of a point of reference. Running it with any more than, I'm going to say 300 pounds out of balance, gets real dicey, and I would not recommend going there. But just to cover all the bases, it is possible to run it with a moderate sized out of balance load just with a binder. And you see as you pull the lever down, it stops it. But if you're fighting it to go down, if it's trying to travel down, or if it's trying to travel up, then that makes it harder to control.
So another way of dealing with an out-of-weight arbor is a bull line. With bull lines, the most important thing to know is you always want to make sure that you're right next to a lift line. You want to make sure that the load is distributed in such a manner that it's going straight up the lift line, straight through the blocks, and straight to the arbor, so that you don't accidentally damage your pipes. When you're tying a bull line, my preferred method is actually going to be a bowline. However, I'm going to make sure that I've got 2 wraps around the pipe before I tie my bowline. So I've got my 2 wraps, and I come down here, tie my bowline, and you've got the bull line. Another option is you can use a clove hitch with 2 safeties on here, but I personally don't like that method just for fear of the knot rolling out. The third acceptable method is not to have a knot at all. What you'll do is you'll actually take your rope and just pull it through until you're at the center. This method is very common when you're in a situation where the rope can't live with the pipe. However, if the rope can live with the pipe or it's only for short term, I highly recommend the bowline. So once you've got your bowline on, you would let your flyman know that the bowline is on and they can start operating. Usually, you'll use the bowline to help them control it. For example, let's say you've got some scenery that are on downtails. You've got 30 foot worth of downtail. Well, in order to help the flyman, you would have a couple of guys hold this rope and just keep tension on it to try and alleviate some of the out of weight issues he'll have. The other thing, which we'll show you in just a minute, is you actually can help get the arbor back up to the loading bridge for them to take the bricks off using a bowline. And actually we'll show you that here in just a second. Alright, so helping the flyman with a bowline is kind of an art form. One of the things that you need to know is how to properly hold the bowline, which my preferred method, as you see here, is I actually take the rope, I put a giant loop in it, and I stand in it. While I'm standing in it, I make sure to keep my two ropes together like this. What this does is it allows some friction to help keep my loop together, but also this way if I were to lose it, it's not like I've got a loop tied. It's not going to take me for a ride, it's going to just run, which is catastrophic, but it's better than going for a ride. The other thing about this method is if the flyman is wanting the arbor to come in so the pipe to go out, this is a good way to control it because I just slack a little bit. I don't know if you can see, but the rope is sliding. It's sliding through my hands, down around my shoe, and then back up towards the pipe. So I've stopped it from sliding. So now let's say that we're trying to get the pipe to come in. The flyman is going to call, usually you're going to have 2 or 3 guys on this rope, but it's only about 80 pounds out of weight, so I'm all right doing it myself. So when the flyman calls that they want the pipe to come in, you're going to grab up high, and you're going to pull. And you're going to just keep pulling. Now if the flyman tells me he wants me to stop, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to grab low. I'm going to start making this loop again. Which as soon as I can, I get a foot in there. And at this point in time, I can actually step into it to bring it down and bring it to a rest again. But the important thing is that you're always communicating with your flyman and with any other bowlines. So, yeah, that's the gist of it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this the rest of the way in. And the other thing to keep in mind is normally when you pull a bowline in, when the pipe gets to you, the flyman's going to yell something about grabbing the pipe. When you grab a pipe, you want to pull it down, and you want to keep your weight on it, but you do not want to get over it. A good method that I highly recommend is the forearm and hand method. This way you've got your weight on it, but if something were to happen, you're not going to catch a pipe to the face when it flies past you. And I believe that covers the basics of operating with a bowline.
Right. Another circumstance to be aware of when you're running something out of weight is if for some reason you have to run it all the way out of balance. So you're going to bring an arbor heavy line set all the way to pipe out, counterweight down. The thing to be aware of is that no matter which method you're using to run the out of balance load, whether you're using just with wraps like this, or whether you've got an axe handle in it, whether you've got a binder on it, any of the methods that we've talked about, there comes a point where the arbor gets so close to you that you can't keep the wraps on it. So if you have a load that's excessive, more than you can hold by yourself with one person, then you have to make sure that you have some help with you before that arbor gets all the way down. Because there's going to be a point where it's going to get down here, and with only 80 pounds I can deal with it myself. But if it was more than that, if it was 180 say, then it gets to a point where my wraps don't work anymore because the arbor is so close that I can't keep the wraps on it. So at that point, you have to make sure that you have enough help so that when you take the wraps off, you have enough help to just hold it and run it in that last 3 or 4 feet, just manually 1 to 1. So for 80 pounds, it's not a big deal. But for a larger amount of weight, you have to be thinking ahead and prepared to have enough help here to be able to set that arbor all the way down on the crash rail. All right, another thing to keep in mind as far as talking about having help around would be that you do have the option to take advantage of your help on the loading bridge. If we had, for instance, we had a heavy black velour drape that we needed to bring all the way in. And I can't pull that by myself. It weighs more than I can pull by myself. I could bring a deckhand over or another person from my flight crew over to help me pull, but then we're side by side and trying to pull in the same space. So can be done, has been done many times, but another option is that you can ask your weight loaders to help pull. In that case, probably you're going to want to be the one to land the piece, and you're going to ask your weight loaders to stand by to help you pull it. So on the loading bridge, standing by for a pull on 23 on my call. So I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to see the goods touch the ground, and then I'm going to call for help. The rub on 23! And they're going to help me pull it. So that adds however many people I have on the weight bridge to help me pull it. Now, if it's heavy, when it gets all the way down here, we all three are, say I've got 2 weight loaders up, we're all 3 pulling. When it hits the deck and the pipe hits all the way down, the next step then is I'm going to need to secure it while they unload it. So right now, while I still got them helping me hold it, I'm going to get some slack and I'm going to take a wrap on it. I'm going to turn my wraps around it and I'm going to put my binder on it. All right, pipe 23 to pipe weight. And then I'll step away so that I'm not directly under where they're working at. So that's another example of using some help when you're on the rail.
Please remember that DeLong Rigging Solutions one-shot training videos are meant as general overviews. Every system is different. Every venue has different procedures. All statements made make certain assumptions about systems and venue similarities. Nothing can replace on-site training with a qualified individual. If ever you have a question or concern about rigging, do not hesitate to reach out to us or another qualified vendor in your area.